There we go. Now we're live. So I'm Shay Munns.
I'm Paige Dutel.
And I'm Suzanne Trepanier.
Okay. So who wants to lead this? Doesn't matter. I can write the summary.
I can lead because I haven't yet.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay. So I guess I'll just start with the first question about the videos.
Okay.
It was, what principles of the effective speaking did you see in each speech? And I know we were talking before, and I personally couldn't find principles that just like stuck out and said that that's what they were. But I thought that some principles from one of the previous videos might have been like a strong introduction to captivate the audience. And I thought that the second video had that just because it was personal, like a personal story from his family. But then the first one too, I think, probably was captivating because that one was personal too, just on different terms, because his faith was like his personal story, where in the second one it was like the guy's family and what they've been through because he had two moms. Um, that's what I found for that question. I'm not really sure what else you guys found. If you want to share.
That's what I mean. We kind of talked about this before, but that's kind of what the principles that I'm taking it on is that the first guy that was against the same-sex marriage, he took it on as a religious thing and like try to use the Bible and explain to people like this is what the Bible says, so we shouldn't support this. Whereas I think the second video was definitely more. I think he pulled on people's emotions a
Yeah.
lot just because he used himself as an example and he said, um, he's like, no one's ever asked me if I was raised by two moms or anything because I'm not any different than you are just because I was raised by two moms. So I think he pulled on people like really emotionally just because I mean, like, well, he's not different than I am just because he had two moms. And so I think that was very effective for him. I don't know. I don't know if the first one was as effective just because not all people read the Bible, not all people are religious. So I don't know how many people he gained from his audience. That's just what I thought.
I think I thought similar things, and it just depends on the perspective that you're coming from.
Yeah.
I think in the Marsha Barlow stuff that we watched, um, and she specifically said never bring religion in. Like that's something that you need to stay away from because it's not something that everyone can relate to, and it can be, unfortunately, a lot of times a religious perspective um, isn't credible because there's a lot of things about the Bible that aren't credible. The Bible has been translated so many different times, and it's been changed so many times that it's really easy for someone to take out that if that's your only if that's the only source that you're using. It's just not really a credible source. And trying to base total morality on your religious background is another thing that people don't like to hear. They want to feel like their moral values are just as important as your Christian moral values, and so you end up, I think, if you use a religious foundation, you end up kind of turning people off to your argument more than if you would take it from maybe more of a social aspect of socially, how is this going to affect our children, our communities, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and that kind of reminded me of what I replied to one of the other questions. So, um, do you guys have any other comments, or do you want to just move on to the next question?
I'm ready to move on.
Yeah, we can move on.
Okay. So, what was the basis or the premise for each speaker's stance? And I thought that this connected a lot with the first question, just because I thought that the first video's basis, he based everything he talked about from his faith in the Bible and what he believed in, where the second one based everything off of his experience with his family and growing up with two moms, and that he isn't different than everyone else, that he grew up the same, and nobody would know that he had two moms unless they specifically asked him or saw them out somewhere. What are your guys' thoughts?
I agreed with you. Just like the first one, it was all on the faith. But then like something to add on to the second one, like I think he pulled on some people. I mean, not just emotion, but I think he pulled on some logic because it's like, well, I'm yeah, I'm just the same as you guys. So logically, does it really matter if I
Right.
have two moms? Because I'm the same, so it shouldn't make a difference, you know. But that's all I could add to that, I think.
Oh no, I thought that was good.
Um, yeah, the thing is, though, I think that you're right. He probably was making a good point. However, how can he say he's the same? Like, he doesn't know everybody. He doesn't know, necessarily that his perceptions and his behaviors and things that are going on with him are really exactly the same. What feels normal to him may not be normal to other people. So it's, I think, a little bit shaky,
Yeah.
him, trying to stand on that ground, because how does he know that he's really the same? Um, and he was trying to um, basically win a debate. So he's not going to bring in experiences where maybe he did have some issues with having two moms. My sister, some of her best friends in Utah, I wouldn't say best friends, but they've become pretty close. It's a lesbian couple, and they have kids about the same age as my sister's kids, and so they've become friends and they carpool together and stuff. And there have been times where the little kids have, been like, my nephew is talking about his dad and how much he loves his dad, and he does this and that with his dad, and where's your guys' dad? And the little kids are like, well, we don't have a dad, but we don't need a dad. We have two moms, and that's just fine. Um, and my little nephew is just a little kid, and he's like, what are you talking about? That's just fine. That's terrible. I can't believe you don't have a dad. So anyway, that at some point that it's got those little kids thinking about what they might be missing out on. I don't know.
That's true. Something you said earlier, like how does he not know? That's true. That I guess you wouldn't know if you're different. I just a thing that he said in there. He said like he's like I don't know if he was talking to the I don't know, mayor or whatever. He's like, I think you would be proud to have me as your son. But so I don't know. I think he kind of took it as maybe logic wasn't the right word for me to use, but just like, well, I'm successful. I'm going to college. I'm doing what other kids are doing. So I'm not different. So I shouldn't be judged badly because I had two moms. I
Yeah.
don't know. I
Yeah.
think I mean, I guess it is emotional, a lot of emotion that he pulled on for his, I guess, the base of his stance. But I think he tried to make it like, try to make himself like, I'm normal. There's nothing wrong with me, and pull people into like feel that way about him too. I don't know.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
think
like that you pointed out that like, how does he know? Because it's like, well, you are different than me because I have different viewpoints on stuff. Like, I think it's important for you to have a mom and a dad, and there seems that a dad could have taught you that your mom's probably didn't teach you. Just like there's things my dad teaches me that my mom wouldn't have, like
Right.
just based on different roles. But
Well, it's kind of like he doesn't really know what he's missing. So,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, I think it sounds like maybe he was just assuming things Maybe
Yeah.
just like he's not completely alike everyone else. Maybe on the surface he might be, but underneath maybe he's not, because he obviously will have different viewpoints than everyone else. And like Shay said, he was brought up differently because like a mom teaches different things than what a dad would. But yeah, I think you guys both did really well with that.
Yeah.
So the next question was, if you were on the fence when it comes to same-sex marriage, how would you feel after listening to each speech? And what I thought, I just looked at it from not having a view from either side, just because I guess I'm not sure about it, because I know what like the Bible says of what to be right and wrong, but then I've also seen other people, kind of like what the guy was talking about, I guess, that seem to be normal, I guess, on the outside, but we don't really know what's going on the inside. But I thought that depending on the perspective you're coming from, either one could have persuaded you if you're coming from like a religious aspect or not. Um, and I think that the second one, like we've been saying all along, because he got more personal about it, it kind of captivated more people. Because I guess I didn't realize from the first video, but I noticed it more in the second one, that when he was done talking, there was a ton of applause. And I didn't notice that in the first one.
Yeah.
So I think it just depends on where you're coming from, of which one might have persuaded you more. How about you guys?
I agree. Like, so for me, it was kind of hard because it's like I feel strongly about it, and so it's like, well, no, you can't persuade me that it's okay.
Like,
But if I try to like step back and look at it, like, okay, if I really wasn't sure, like honestly, it's almost like the second one probably would have persuaded me a little bit more because it's like that pull on your emotions,
yep,
and and then but then it's like you said too, the first one, it's like, well, if you were really like into the Bible and you knew your stuff from there, then like you'd be pulled more towards the first one. But I think overall, I think most people would be pulled by the guy with the emotions.
yeah,
Because I mean, it's a stronger pull on you. I don't know, emotions do that. But yeah, like you said too in the video, there was a ton of cheering and applause after the second one, and like the first one, it was just kind of like, okay, what do we do now? You know, it's like,
yeah.
but he didn't have the people feeling it and riled up for it. But
Right. Yeah, I don't even know if there was any applause. I guess I just didn't notice.
I think that we see this happening really in throughout the world too, though. We see people that were maybe on the fence about it, and then because the gay movement has really figured out how to tap into um, people's emotions and their compassion and their inner kindness, and we all want people to be happy. Well, not all, but most of us, we want to see others happy, and we want to be able to be compassionate and supportive and those kinds of things. And so the same-sex marriage, they really do have a lot of arguments that seem like they're very, very, um, they seem very humanistic. They're really trying to talk about equal rights and about not being persecuted and all those things. And I think for the most part, Americans are like, yeah, we don't want a group of people to feel persecuted or feel like they don't have equal rights and all that. So if you can tap into that, with the public, then yeah, you're going to get a big following. I think most people that were kind of on the fence about it have become more. I've seen it in my neighborhoods and in um, people that go to. They're very religious, but um, they're really standing up for gay rights because they think it's the Christian thing to do. And I understand where they're coming from, but I think that we need to remember that we the Christian thing to do is always to be kind, always to be respectful, always to be understanding, to always just wrap these people, everybody up in our arms and say, you know what, we love you, and we just want to, let you know that we're here to love you, and that kind of thing, without having to say, um, but we think that what you're doing is good for society because, you know, we don't believe that way. But anyway, yeah, I think that we're seeing that in the world, that people that were on the fence are definitely being swept up in this idea of equal rights and compassion.
I thought that was really good because I think that most of the time people are quick to judge, and instead of, like you said, just telling them that they are loved and that um, even though people might not agree with them, there's still people there for them to help them through what they're going through. And
Right.
I think people forget about that.
Yep. It's very true.
So the next question was there anything you found less effective about the speech? And I think we talked about it a little bit here and there with the other questions. I personally thought that for the first speech, um, it seemed like because he based it so much on his beliefs, that I think it would have been harder for someone who didn't have those kinds of beliefs to be persuaded by him. And the same thing for the second one, because he didn't base it on religion, he might not be able to persuade those people that believe so strongly in their faith to believe that same-sex marriage was okay. So I think it goes the same for both, that they're not, because of what they're talking about, they're not able to persuade the opposite enough, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
I think something that, just looking at the way they delivered the speeches, kind of like, and the first guy, he was like, he wasn't as into it, he wasn't as emotional. Like, he could have been, I showed his emotion about his religion a little bit more, and I think it would have been more effective. Whereas,
Yeah.
like, the second guy, I mean, he was definitely very emotional, and you could tell that when you were listening to him. I mean, his voice fluctuated a lot more, and it definitely grabbed your attention. Whereas the first one, it was just kind of like, oh, well, in the Bible, in Leviticus, it says this, and not really like a lot of passion behind it. Like, I think he could have made it a little bit better just by bringing in more passion, just even his passion about his religion,
Yeah.
not necessarily about just emotion, like, but I don't know. I thought that was something that was different. That was kind of interesting in how effective they were.
Um, I was just kind of thinking along the same lines as Paige in that your target audience, you really have to consider your target audience whenever you're going to try and give a persuasive speech. And the one young man, I think that he was hoping that his target audience was a group of people who kind of have the same set of belief systems. And the fact is that you know it sounds like they didn't really, and that even if they did, they weren't the ones that were making the most noise about it. And so I think that's just a really key theme when you're thinking about doing a persuasive speech. You need to think about who your audience is going to be. And, his speech may be okay if he was going to be speaking, at a some kind of a Christian gathering, but not so much if it was a group of people that he was trying to convince of, the way he thought about things.
Yeah. And I obviously thought similar things, so I agree. And to go off of what Shay said, Um, I think that the first guy kind of came off like he was nervous because I noticed in certain parts his voice was really shaky. So I think that probably didn't go to his benefit, whereas the other guy just seemed super confident and maybe he's spoken at things like that before and maybe that's why he did so well. But we don't know. But I don't know, that's just what I saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. The confidence, there is definitely a different level of confidence in delivering their speeches that made a difference.
Yeah.
Uh, so there was those questions about that article.
Yep.
Do I just realized that?
So, and they were the same
I like
questions,
that
right?
one. Go ahead, sorry.
They were the same questions from movies, though, right? Just about the article instead.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Do you have time to do them real quick?
Yeah, I can do them real quick.
Okay. So what principles of the effective speaking did you see in the article? And once again, just because I'm not really sure what these certain principles are, I guess something that I could think of from the article was that the way that the guy wrote kind of allowed me to like vision how he'd be relaying it to his audience because the words just seemed like the way someone would talk rather than how someone would write. It just didn't seem as formal as writing to me.
I can't remember, I'm trying to remember the beginning. Did he use his story at all in there? I don't know if he did.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
I'm trying to think, but I know he used um, a lot of facts, I think, and then he would like say something and he goes, I know I'm gonna hear it from the other side. Like I know I'm gonna get things from the other side from this. So he recognized that, which I think for like at least for me, I was like, okay, so he knows what other people are saying about this, and so he's better able to be effective in writing what he really wants because he addresses those concerns a little bit of the opposite view.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I thought about.
I think that I remember from the video of that woman, what's her last name Barlow. I think I remember her saying something about if you're like not sure of something just to come out and say it. That way both sides know that you're kind of equal but not all the way onto one side. It was something along those lines. I just remember something about if you're not sure, just come out and tell your audience. So I wonder if he was kind of doing that.
I remember her saying something about, I mean, she talked a lot about how it's really important to know the opposition. Like, study, study, study. Like, figure out, like, once you have the topic in mind, study everything you can read about it. Just Google it and just, look at everything you can read about it so you know what the opposition is saying, you know what their arguments are, and that their arguments are changing a lot, too. Like, they're not just staying with the same thing. They're changing their catchphrases so that they can draw in people, that maybe are tired of hearing about the issues, so they just kind of change things around. And she said, if you need to stay really up on top of it, so that when you come to give your speech, you can say something like, "This is what my opposition is saying about it. I know what they're saying," and then you can give your rebuttal. And it just makes you sound like you have more credibility because you're on the one hand, it makes you sound like you're equal, like you're saying, "Look, I understand what they're saying." Um, and I get that. So it makes you sound like you have kind of a more neutral position. But then, so that draws people in thinking, oh, she's being reasonable about this. She's actually looking at the opposition. But then you come out and you say, but this is what I have to say against that. And then you can make your argument against that. And so it kind of is a double whammy of, yeah, she gets it. She knows what they're saying. And she understands what they're saying. So she's trying to be neutral. However, she thinks she has a better argument. Does that make sense? I feel like I used a lot of words to say something simple.
No, that makes sense. I think the guy did a really good job of that in the article. Like, he definitely, like, well, they say this about it, but, and kind of like, this is what their reasons, but this is my reasons, or, I think he did. I don't know. I think he knew what his opposite view was, and so he was able to address it really well.
So if you guys are okay, do you want to move to the next question?
Yeah.
Okay. So it was just what the basis was that you thought that he spoke about. I don't know. Something that kind of stuck out to me was that he viewed the marriage between a man and a woman as different when everyone else views like same-sex marriage as different, because he said that like obviously a man and a woman are different when two guys or two women aren't, and that a man and a woman is known to like meet each other for survival and in order to have children to punish the earth, and that the civilization depends on their bond because women possess certain things that men don't and vice versa, so they're able to contribute differently, whereas like the other kinds of marriages might not be able to contribute differently. What about you guys?
I agree with what you were saying, Paige. I'm trying to what his basic. Yeah, I think the main thing that he, I guess, wanted to, his basis of his thing was that like a marriage should be between a man and a woman, just because that's how you make a family. Is
Yeah.
between a man and a woman. You can't create kids without a man and a woman. And yes, you can adopt kids if you're in a homosexual marriage, but or partnership, you can adopt, but you don't have the ability to be able to create that family. So why should it be called marriage? Like, I mean, I liked what he said. He was like, well, then call it something else. Don't call it marriage because it's not a marriage. But I mean, and I think another thing he did talk about too was like the rights a little bit, and it's not taking away anybody's rights. I mean, you just can't call it marriage. But I don't know. That's kind of what I thought about it.
Yeah, I really like that. I thought that that was a good point. And I guess I never thought about it that way until I read the article about like why like don't call it marriage because it's not. I don't know. The way he explained it, I think just made sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because what the opposition tries to say is, we're fighting over a word. It's just a word, um, but marriage is more than a word. It means more than just two people deciding to commit to one another. And like you said, he talked about how it was the foundation for family. And in at the beginning of the whole gay rights movement, they had a different word. They called it a civil union. And from what I understand, even though I've been told differently, is that civil unions really had all the same rights as a married couple. They had the right to have their partner on their health insurance. They had the right to have their partner as the sole receiver of anything in their wills. So I, to me, when this got to be such a big issue and people were getting so upset over it, I just thought, what are you wanting that you don't think you're getting? Because a civil union, you're getting all of the same rights. And once you move into the territory of wanting to call it a marriage, then you start to, because marriage is a way to do the theology of a Christian belief or of a religious belief. And so what it would do for them is allow them um, to have weddings in their churches and to whatever churches they want. And I know that there would be a Christian church that there might be same-sex couples that wanted to leave the church because they couldn't get married in the temple. Anyways, I think that's where people that who felt like this was coming from a religious place, because we believe marriage is ordained of God, so God is a huge part of marriage. But there was this concern and worry that that we would no longer have our religious freedom, but our religious freedom would be taken from us. And so I think that's where there was a very strong conflict, where each side was worried about their own particular freedom being taken from them. But again, I didn't quite understand what you were hoping to get with calling it a marriage, rather than just saying, we have a civil union, because it was essentially giving them everything that lawfully the marriage does.
I thought that was good. I caught like bits and pieces of that because for some reason the voice was like in and out.
Oh, bummer. Okay.
I think I got maybe what you were trying to say. But yeah, it did make sense from what you were saying.
From what you were to hear. Okay.
So if you were looking at it from being on the fence, do you think you would have been persuaded by this author of the article?
I think I would have. I think I would definitely lean towards not having same-sex marriage. I pulled it up and I was trying to find the part in there, but I know he said he talked about a little bit about religion, but it didn't matter what your religion was, because it was just if you were concerned about society and children in general. But then it talks about too, if you are a good Christian, then if you do support it, you'd be going against all of against what Christians would believe, against what God wants. And I like what he pointed out in here. I don't know if it was this class or another one, but I had to read a lot about standing up for what you believe in and not just falling into what society wants. But he said, he's like, I'm not going to be one of those Christians that are just going to give in. He goes, no, I'm going to stand firm to what I think is right and what my religion was. He said, oh, here, I think it is. He said, many conservatives have entirely surrendered on this subject and have fallen silent on every other social issue, instead electing to stick to the easy topics. The easy topics which mean nothing if we lose the culture. Millions of Christians have done the same. He says, fine, let them run away in the midst of the battle. They're cowards. They care more about being popular than speaking the truth. I won't join them in their retreat. I made the decision a while ago, and I'll take what comes as a result. I don't know. I thought that was really cool that he said that, he's still going to stand up for it even when people aren't. It reminded me of a talk. I don't know if it was this first class, but we had to read. But yeah, I think he would have, if I was on the fence, I think I would be persuaded his way. I don't know. I really like the article though, so. But.
Sorry, I'm trying to look up the article too here. Was it persuasive? No, what was it?
Yeah, I thought that some things that he wrote about that were really good were just things that anybody could relate to. It wasn't just looking towards like one specific, like you said, religion or class or culture. It was just like the basics of what everybody kind of was brought up knowing from like when time started.
No, I think that's what made it really effective too was just that he took, okay, here's the religion parts and here's, society and just like different parts so it kind of could get everybody's attention no matter where they were kind of in their life.
Um, yeah, this is a really popular blogger, this guy. What's his name? Marsh or something like that?
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of things that he's written, and he does a good job and just trying to like get to the bottom of things and just say, let's not confuse things. And I think that I don't know, whenever I think about the proclamation to the world, the family proclamation, and then I think about the world and how they are viewing family and gender and these kinds of things, that the world, I feel like the world is making chaos out of it. Like, it's pretty simple with the way God has it set up. And the world is trying to make it more confusing. And I think that a lot of people are growing up confused because the world is sending them all these crazy different messages that, oh, if you are a girl, but you like to, you know, climb trees and hang out with the boys in your neighborhood and skateboard and all this, then you must be gender confused. And the Lord keeps it simple. He's like, okay, if you're a girl and you have girl parts, you're a girl. If you're a boy and you were born with boy parts, you're a boy. You might have interests either way. You might have, a boy can have interest in something that might be typically a girl interest, like dancing or something. But that doesn't mean that he's confused about his gender. Anyway, so I just feel like the world is really trying to confuse all of these things, and that if people would just stick to what Heavenly Father says, then they could still grow up and be their own person, and have their own interests, but they could still consider themselves a girl. I don't know.
No, you're right. The world definitely does make it more confusing than it really is.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last question, just was there anything that you found that was less effective about what you spoke about? And I guess off the top of my head, I really can't think of anything. I mean, sometimes I thought his article was really good. Here and there, I got a little lost, but that might not have been him. It just might have been me reading, getting lost. Did you guys find anything that seemed a little less effective?
Well, I remember the Marcia Barlow stuff, all of her different suggestions, and she talked a lot about word count and about having, the effective amount of words to use, whether you're speaking or whether it's in an article, and that when people look at that bar in the end, and when you're scrolling through and the bar is really little, that that's going to be a super long article and it's going to be a really huge investment of time, and that and so his article may have run a little long. I think that if there was anything, like, Paige, you were saying that you got a little lost, it's probably because it was just it was too many words. And so, as humans, we can only absorb a certain amount of words before our attention span starts to go away. So, I don't know, maybe that's the only thing that I would say is that it maybe went on a little bit long. He was getting a little too wordy.
No, I agree with you, Susie. I think he could have shortened it a little bit and maybe even had a better impact if it was just a little short. Because sometimes it's like, okay, I feel like I've read this same thing a couple of times now, and it's like, I don't know, kind of redundant in some places.
Yeah.
And that made me think of, I think it was like one of his very first paragraphs. It just seemed really long, and I remember Barlow talking about to make sure that you do paragraphs and if you have to, like, label them. But I I think one of the first ones was just really long, and that might have been the one that I just got confused in. So maybe if you broke it up a little more, it would have been easier to read.
Yeah, I think you're right. She did talk a lot about paragraph breaks, and to make sure that the end of one paragraph catches the reader so that they want to continue on. So you try and put some kind of a in the last sentence of the paragraph, you need to put something in there that's going to draw them in again, like some, pithy, I think that was the word they used, phrase, or some, kind of interesting twist on it. So you're right. I think he could have done a little bit different with the whole setup of his paragraphs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I did like his opening. I liked his opening line though. I think that makes people want to sit up and read. Let me explain this whole marriage thing. I think that caught a lot of would catch people's attention.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's always interesting to just like open something up and have it be just like such an easy read, like it was like he was speaking it to you instead of you reading it. I thought that his introduction like that was good.
Yeah.
It captivated me.
It wasn't intimidating, so.
There wasn't any huge words that were confusing.
Right.
So do you guys have any final comments or anything?
Not that I can think of.
Okay.
No, me either. I think we did a pretty good job. Thanks for being patient with me. I had to set up the whole Google. My husband on his computer doesn't have Google Chrome, so when I got up and tried to get in, I was like, he doesn't have Google Chrome, so I had to download Google Chrome, and I had to go through like this whole process to try and. So, anyways.
No worries. Yeah, so I'll do the write-up and I'll post the link.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then I think next week we have one again. I don't know.
Okay. I'm glad you found it in this one. I don't know how I missed it. I thought I was going through all of the file, and I was like, maybe we don't have it. Okay.
Oh, I didn't find it at first. I even asked her, I was like, do we have one? And then right after I put it up, I found it, and I was like, oh.
Oh, there it is.
I found it finally.
I'm so glad you did.